Welcome. This is the Water Action Platform, and if you're watching this live, it is Thursday, the 17th of October, 2024. I'm Stuart Woolley, your guest host for today, and normally I work as our Head of Technology and Scouting within ISLE, but for today only, Master Pierce has allowed Igor out of his cage. In fact, I bet you don't even remember my name and Igor is stuck with you. I don't expect you to remember the name of a guest host, but I do ask that you remember the name of one of our sponsors. Our sponsors are genuinely the reason that we get to make these episodes at the frequency and quality that we do, and the reason you get to meet me and many of my other ISLE colleagues as guest hosts too. So thank you to our sponsors. These sponsors have stuck with the Water Action Platform as we've grown it to what we are today, over 69 episodes. Now that I've acknowledged the journey of our sponsors, I invite you to come on a journey with me and a journey of our own. First up today is Fluidion's Open Data Initiative, where they are building the case studies that our sector and regulators need in order to improve the ways we monitor our waters. Then we speak to one of the leads of an initiative to perform a meta-analysis of WASH failures to understand why WASH projects often repeat the same mistakes, why we're still talking about the same mistakes, and to challenge us to be better professionals. Then we speak to UNICEF's new WASH Innovation Hub, who are very conscious of those WASH failure stories and WASH challenges, and have already changed the ways that they tackle innovation to be better at serving people who need help. And finally is a small field trip that will instill you with the wisdom you need to be the most interesting person at the dinner table. The 2024 Summer Olympics and Paralympics were hosted in Paris, with many of the swimming components of the games held in the main river that runs through the city of Paris. This got a lot of attention in the media, mostly because this river has historically not been of bathing quality. Many Olympic events were postponed during the Games due to high pathogen levels. Fluidion is a water quality monitoring company that ISLE has known for a long time. This is them presenting at one of our TAG events many years ago. The quick summary of Fluidion is they are a very R&D focused innovator with several products that can monitor pathogen counts and water quality parameters. I recently did my usual tech scouting game and checking in on them and their website to see how they're getting on and whether they have anything new. So imagine my intrigue when I saw Fluidion was running their own private sampling program at the Paris Olympics and reporting the data openly on live in a live dashboard. This wasn't the first time Fluidion has run such an open data initiative, as Fluidion is trying to create bodies of evidence that change the thinking behind the way regulations require us to monitor water quality. Fluidion are on a long-term mission to demonstrate that the way we measure alkaline water can be improved, and the tools are already available. Regulations ask us to consider free-floating pathogens, shown here on the right, but Fluidion says that we also need to be looking at how many pathogens are hitching a ride on the particles that float in our waterways, and are currently going unnoticed or uncounted when it comes to pathogen counts. That is reflected on the left. So with so many eyes on the Olympics, Fluidion started getting a lot of media attention for their open data initiative, but the interesting water science wasn't coming through, to me at least. Meet Dan, head of Fluidion. I spoke with Dan to get the full version from the disruptors themselves.
Thank you, Stuart. So I'm Dan Angelescu, CEO of Fluidion. Fluidion is a water technology company specializing in novel methodologies and instrumentation for measuring water quality. And myself, I'm trained as a physicist, and I'm specializing in physics and biology as well, of the very, very small scale, so at the micron level and below.
Fantastic, thanks, Ed. So Fluidion has been around for a while at this point, and you've had some success. So why do this open data initiative now? Why this case study at the Paris Olympics in 2024?
Very good question. You know, we have an R&D center that's actually based in Paris, so the Seine River is a little bit of a playground for us for doing our R&D. So we've been studying it for many years now. And we've also worked with the city of Paris to monitor multiple locations in the Seine River and, in preparation for the Olympic Games, and also the bathing water site that was opened in Paris since 2017 in a canal, in the Ourcq Canal, that we've been monitoring as well every single year since 2017.
So this is home territory for you. You're a local.
We are local, and indeed, we've been really studying this river in great detail. And this was an opportunity for us to actually measure during some of the most exciting event, the 2024 Olympics, but also the 2024 Olympics came with the inauguration of a big infrastructure project here in Paris to capture rainwater and sewage. And it was a unique opportunity to monitor that live and to be there right as it opens and see the effect of that. You don't often have this kind of opportunity. So we took advantage of it.
No, it certainly caught our attention as well, and why we want to speak to you about it. So digging into the details of what we want to speak about, how did you go about gathering that data and comparing it to the official data?
For the 2024 Olympics, we did our independent project on the side, and we opened the Open Data Initiative, which is a website where we publish these results every single day. So we didn't just measure using our technology, we also measured using the standard laboratory technology, which means that we do have data that relates to the standard methods today and then data that comes from the new technology that we developed, so we can compare them and we can see how well they fit. We've also compared that with the data provided by the city of Paris. The only problem was that data was only provided weeks after the events, so we could compare retrospectively, whereas we provided the data in real time.
Yeah, it was quite a good joy to follow the blog in real time and actually see the daily results come through. But what is it you were measuring? What is it that you're actually trying to show? Let's get into the science of it, because it is important.
So what we saw was something really interesting. What we saw is that our technology measuring planktonic, these are the free-floating bacteria, provided results which were very close to the standard laboratory method, which confirms the fact that these methods essentially see the free E. coli count. But the results, the comprehensive results, which took into account these fecal particles, sometimes were a factor of 3, a factor of 5 higher. So you actually
it's not just a little bit you're missing, it's a significant amount of pathogens in the water that are being overlooked.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about situations where the standard laboratory method, for example, this happened during the World Triathlon during the triathlon event on July 31st. The standard methods measured below 500, whereas the comprehensive count was over 2,000, and the
governing body limit was about 1,000, so that's actually way over what their own rules and regulations say. Well, I mean, they were using the standard method.
Absolutely. So this puts, these events in a gray zone where, by the standard methods, which we know they don't measure these fecal particles, you get good results. But in reality, when you look at everything that's inside those fecal particles, you get much higher counts. And the problem is that the athletes that are competing, they don't filter out these particles. I mean, if they drink water from the river, they will drink
the particles
and the particles. So they are exposed to this risk in reality, but the standard methods are not capturing it.
So, for argument's sake, this isn't a free-floating and particulate attached matter where a correlation factor can be used. It's not just a matter of the standard methods are close enough and there just needs to be a bit of adjustment or correlation to get the better picture. It really is two different things influenced differently by events.
Absolutely. And that's a very good point, because you could think, well, maybe you can just adjust the standard. We can adjust the levels. No, it doesn't work that way, because you can have waters where you have absolutely no particles. So the comprehensive count will be equal to the free floating count and to the laboratory count. And you have waters where you have a significant number of particles where the comprehensive count can be 100 times higher than the free count. We have had those situations. So this variability makes it impossible to actually adjust the risk levels or the thresholds. It doesn't work that way. You actually need to measure the bacteria attached to these particles in order to create new epidemiology studies that will provide new risk levels, but that are based on the actual correct count of bacteria, not by what the standard methods measure today.
In terms of the data that you've collected and proving the point that you have to measure both the free-floating and particulate matter, what does that mean now? What are the hard questions the regulators need to ask themselves?
Well, that's a very good question, Stuart. And yes, we do think that we have uncovered sort of a blind spot of the current regulations. And we have uncovered the fact that, in fact, they do not correctly assess risk in certain types of water. And these are specifically urban bathing waters, which can be impacted by untreated sewage going into rivers, for example. And a lot of cities now are looking at opening bathing waters in their rivers. There is a swimmable city alliance. I mean, there are many movements around the world. And we believe that in order to ensure the safety of recreational users in these waters, the regulations need to change so as to comprise not only the standard laboratory methods with their current limitations, but also comprehensive counts. So there is a big effort now that we are embarking upon to publicize our results and to discuss with regulators and to present our method. And not only there are other methods that can do comprehensive counts, but present the case study that we actually need to include these in order to have proper assessments of risk and protect public health effectively from waterborne disease.
Fantastic. That's what it comes to at the end of the day. Although the standard methods do help protect and provide that safety within the waters, it's not the complete picture that it provides, and there's additional risk, like you're saying.
Exactly. Yes. So basically, the regulations need to catch up with the latest science, and that is how we can ensure the best protection.
Well, that's the fun thing about science and innovation space. That the goalpost is always moving as we learn more and can do more.
Absolutely. Science always moves forward.
So, I do encourage you to look through the data yourselves on Fluidian's open data platform and see what your take on this is. That URL is on the screen now. Dan also provided a really good analogy on their webpage where he talks about how a monitor is a policeman counting commuters on the road, but counting a bus full of people as a commuter as one, because there's only one bus, doesn't make sense, and we're missing all the stowaways in the bus that we should actually be counting as well. Again, that just reinforces the point that while current standards do provide a layer of safety for public health, if we really want to know how many pathogens are in our water, we need to count all of the pathogens and not just the free-floating ones. So, thank you for joining us today, Dan. Before we move on to our next two interviews, we need a quick primer. When we talk about WASH today, we don't just mean water sanitation and hygiene as we usually speak about it in the urban or engineering perspective or the utility perspective. We're talking about projects that go beyond just infrastructure, municipalities, and utilities. We're talking about projects that have a very prominent human element to them. We're talking about projects in regions where there is a lack of adequate water sanitation and hygiene, and it's adversely impacting people's lives. So when we talk about WASH failures, it's not just as simple as a technology or engineering element not being up to task. We're talking about an ecosystem of technologies, remote projects implementation, social facilitation, stakeholder engagements, human injustice, financial business models, fog of war, and many other factors that can collapse the house of cards that is a WASH project and lead to project failure. Obviously, we as a sector ought to talk about and acknowledge our failures so that we can figure out preventative measures for the next time and the next projects. We want to disseminate those learnings. We don't want everyone in the sector to make the same mistakes. And if we can stop making the same old mistakes, we can be a more efficient machine and make sure our limited resources only go towards success. So there have been previous studies on why WASH projects have failed going back many years. But this new initiative is the new generation trying to do something different and take the same old discussion another step further. I had a wonderful conversation with Danny on the story of how they got going. But unfortunately, the interview was a bit long and a bit much to squeeze into the segment here. So we'll still hear the good stuff from Danny directly, but I'll give you the quick summary on how this project came to be. Danny, Esther, and Becky met up at the FSM4, Fecal Sludge Management 4, conference in 2017. That's Danny on the left, Becky on the right, and Esther in the middle. Try and remember those faces for a little later. At this conference, our trio noticed a rather high number of presentations talking about project failures and learnings from those failures. They had a subsequent dig through journal archives and found not only had WASH failures been a common conference theme since the 1970s, but they also noticed that a lot of this information had been published. They also noticed that it was always the project managers, academics, or administrators reporting on those failures and behind the publications. In 2018, Danny is now putting herself on stage running WASH failure game shows to break the ice at conferences. She got people to ease into the discussion in a light-hearted way before turning the heat up and getting more serious about why are projects still failing in the same old ways in the 21st century. This initiative was so successful that calls to action were proposed directly after these conferences, and they took the shape of the Nakuru Accords. The Nakuru Accords is a pact amongst WASH professionals and practitioners to be open and honest about failures in projects. And once this started gaining traction, a small budget was provided to Danny to start documenting WASH failures, capitalizing on this momentum and speaking directly to frontline professionals. So by now, the results are in, the numbers have been crunched, and the summary has been published. waterwomanworld.com can point you towards the full reports and findings, which I would encourage you to see out. But this is where our interview with Danny picks up from. I wanted to know the full explanation in her own words, what she learned.
Yeah. So we interviewed 96 frontline professionals, and we realised that we weren't hearing from the funders of projects. So then we actually got some funding from the Sanitation Learning Hub at Institute for Development Studies, and we went and interviewed 20 funders of WASH projects, which ranged from really small funders up to big multilaterals. So then bringing together all of that, when we felt we had a pretty good picture of how everyone was thinking about failures that occurred, particularly in sub-Saharan African countries, we could see that one of the kind of like the overarching reason for all these smaller failures was the way that WASH is so often projectized. It's these sums of money for a particular area for a particular amount of time. There was a real pre-definition of what projects were going to be, and there was very little accountability to actual users on the ground. So really what we're seeing is that the implementers, for example, they are not accountable. They might be personally accountable and they might feel really bad being accountable to the people who are actually meant to be using WASH services in whatever form that takes. But really all of the accountability is upwards to the funders. And all the funders seem to think, well, we're different. We have a really good relationship with the people who implement the project, and it's all very participatory, and they always tell us the truth when they fill in their reports and things, which was just totally at odds with what we had from the other funders again. Yes, again, we're fine, but all the other funders, they're having issues because they don't trust, they don't use participatory approaches and things. And then, of course, at odds with the 96 interviews we've done with frontline professionals. So that real lack of accountability also kind of, I think the way that it's playing out a lot on the ground is that there's a lot of wishful thinking in WASH. Something we also found between all of the different types of actors that we were talking to was that people have different definitions of when something is a success. So at the end of a project or a program, it might be like we can tick the box that it succeeded. But then people on the ground might think, oh, well, it's only going to be there for the next 6 months. It's not actually a success until you can see that's long-term sustainability. I think the thing which I saw that I don't know that it's surprising, but something I really noticed is that the accountability to users in terms of like designing programs as to what our intended users actually want seems to be the first thing to go. When the going gets tough or the funding gets tight, the first thing to go is planning with community members and that kind of thing. I feel like in the last 50 years, we have been putting more of the participation stuff in, or moving up the participation ladder, but still not to the point where we're actually accountable to designing WASH services for the people who are actually going to use them.
So it sounds like when you were saying earlier, a lot of it's wishful thinking, that a new hashtag of washful thinking is needed. So there's actually a lot more rationale and flexibility around the finances. But I mean, for you personally, you were involved in a lot of it, digesting that information that came out of it. What surprised you the most out of all the results and interviews?
I guess what surprised me was that I wasn't surprised. I am the one who actually went through and coded all 96 of the frontline professional interviews. And of course, there were some shockers and times where it was like, oh my goodness, did someone really say that to this person? So it kind of then fell into two camps. So there were people who were saying it didn't work because the intended users weren't dedicated enough, and fair enough, they had other things on their plate. They wanted to send their kids to school, they wanted to buy food, they didn't care about WASH at that time. But then you had, the other half of people we'd interviewed who were saying it's their fault they should have been doing this stuff. They should have been more invested and put more time in and more effort. And it made me a bit sad to see that, really, the way it was articulated sometimes, without thinking about the fact that even though we live and breathe wash as being like the most important thing in the world every day, it's not necessarily how intended users feel. And so even though you might think that it's important that they are able to access the wash that they want, and of course it is, you've got to figure out a way of working with people that makes the most of their time and their priorities and everything like that.
So then if I can be as bold to as ask, what's next? Like, we don't want this to become another dusty report on a shelf. I mean, you're not done with this. There's more on your side coming. But then what's the call to action for us in the sector as well that can learn from this and be better?
We have got a paper in review and a paper that we're writing at the moment looking at all the funder stuff. And we really want people to focus on that accountability thing. I can't say accountability enough. I think we live in a world where it's often easy to step back and say, well, it's just my job. I've got to feed my family. I don't need to be worried about this on a meta level kind of thing. But actually, we do have to be accountable to the people that we are trying to serve in the way that we've chosen to be WASH people. And we need to, if those of us who are in a more powerful position, who do have that privilege to step forward and say that, we have to start saying it. And it really drives me crazy when I hear about yet another session at a big global conference with people who work for big multilateral organizations or whoever saying, oh, Chatham House rules. We can't tell anyone what we're talking about. Instead of them being the ones who actually can admit to this is where things are going wrong. Because how can we expect people who are doing the job because they need the pay that day from doing data collection or whatever to feed their family to be the ones who have to step up and say, oh no, we've stuffed up and it's not working properly. So accountability, let's, put your head on the chopping block. It's scary, I know, but, we've got to do something and not just keep making the same mistakes for over 50 years.
No, thank you, Danny. Thank you for challenging us to be more accountable and, like I say, put your head on the chopping block. It is scary, but you've done it. We should follow the lead. So thank you for joining us today, and good luck picking apart those investors when you do the next part of the WASH failures analysis.
Thank you.
So that was Danny. I'd like to thank Danny for joining us and sharing her wisdom. In the interview, when I said Danny put her head on the chopping block, I really do mean it. I'm ashamed to say that Danny has sacrificed more than I think I would be willing to have gotten that publication out into the world and all the work that was needed to get that far. Maybe that's a story for another WAP, but as promised, here are the Nakuru Accords that inspired this meta-analysis of WASH failures. These Accords list 9 points of how to be a better WASH professional and what accountability looks like in the workplace, that accountability that Danny was talking about. I also signed them a while ago and invite you to have a look at them too if you would like to have an honest moment of reflection on how we can be better in our work. That's waterwomanworld.com. And staying with the WASH world, I'm a fan of UNICEF when it comes to WASH interventions. They really know what works and what doesn't. Again, to them, WASH means something different as there is a huge human factor at play, and especially when it comes to children. They work in some of the hardest places to work in as WASH professionals, prioritizing those that the Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals promised we wouldn't leave behind. UNICEF has had a programmed approach to WASH and innovation within WASH, and from that they also have a heck of a lot of experience to draw on, which they've communicated through a set of WASH innovation problem statements. I don't expect you to be able to read those on the screen now, the text is small, I know. They're available at the link below if you want to go into them. But the main takeaways from these are that the problem statements have driven UNICEF to rethink the approach that they're taking to managing WASH and innovation and achieving impact. This new approach will be more end-user focused, more flexible in their project planning and funding, more accountable to society and the end users. Is this all sounding a little familiar yet? Meet Esther, one of the faces I challenged you to remember earlier. Esther was one of the co-founders of the WASH Failures program we just spoke to Danny about, and one of the authors of the Nakuru Accords. It's not hard to spot where those 9 points of the Accords come into play in Esther's current work. The UNICEF Global Sustainable Wash Innovation Hub is tackling their WASH projects with a portfolio approach, focusing on the scaling up of WASH innovation, making sure that solutions land on the ground well, ensuring positive and meaningful impact with the resources they have. The link between Esther and Danny is a coincidence, by the way. This isn't a tag team event. If you want more coincidences, Dan from Fluidion, who we met much earlier, is also very familiar with UNICEF WASH, the Innovation Hub, having gone through their process, speaking to Esther at the time. Again, I only found about that connection after I spoke to Dan earlier. So if anything, we could call this episode of the Water Action Platform the Esther Show.
So the WASH Innovation Hub's working across 3 different areas. We're working across connecting and convening, leveraging UNICEF's power as a big convener to bring people together. And sometimes innovations and progress can grow just from opportune introductions. I think we've all seen that. We've all got good examples of just showing that there's some research happening in the US that has benefit in Sri Lanka and how we can put all of that together. There is a capacity challenge. Managing innovation means doing things differently. And as a sector, we're often quite a lot of engineers and technical people who do things in quite a formulaic way. So we need to add in opportunities and capacity building to enable people to do things differently. Initially, we're focusing on UNICEF, but our role is also to support government. So how can we support government to do things differently and to bring about change that enables that faster progress?
So just to interject, I know the Innovation Hub has also had a strong track record on working with technology innovators and startups too. Sorry, was that the final area that I just interrupted?
So the last area, which is the bit that I manage, is this carefully curated set of projects against identified problems. So we did some work where we looked at the WASH sector and we said, what are the biggest problems that are preventing us making progress against SDG 6? And we came up with 4 problem statements. And now we're working on a set of projects that address those 4 problem statements. So looking at these projects as potential solutions and generating the evidence, the toolkits, the means to be able to share that more, to accelerate how those can be shared and ensure progress against them, to allow others to replicate it. So that's how we see that piece working right now. And those are not product-based. They may have product elements, but if products were the solution, we'd have them by now. It needs more than that. It's that systems approach. It's around bringing the right people together at the right time, the role of the private sector, of utilities, of governments, and everyone doing their piece to enable that big change to happen.
Awesome. So that's quite a lot. You've been busy with this new approach and you've already preempted and answered my next line of questioning of what is next, where is this going?
So the biggest project we've got is the one in the Horn of Africa, where we have got an improved approach to identification of groundwater. So we've increased our borehole success rates from around 50% to 95% accuracy through an improved groundwater mapping and identification process using overlays and verifying it with hydrologists and experts in the area who can take the improved geological data and put it all together. From there, we've now gone, okay, if we can identify this water, how are we going to access it? And then how are we going to ensure sustainable services? So the project's grown from just being around groundwater identification to actually how can we bring in the private sector and banks to have innovative, blended, sustainable finance models that enable the region to provide water and hopefully reduce the insecurity in the region, which is often due to water. So it's becoming a much bigger project that we think in the next 5 years is going to help people, 25 million people in the Horn of Africa to access water. That's kind of the biggest project that we've got. We've proven this methodology now. It's how we scale that and give the resources and knowledge to other countries and governments within the region. But we're also looking, finance is one of the biggest challenges we're seeing in the sector. And we've identified models for West Africa around rotating sanitation funds. So this is the idea that we can get private or government donor money and reinvest it multiple times to see a bigger impact. So we now have models for Togo, Rwanda, we're working with Ghana as well. And once those models they've been developed, and we're looking at getting the investment now to then be able to prove them. And then we have replicable models that can be tweaked for different country settings. So that's the idea.
So is this the way forwards for you, or is like a constant reassessment of how is it going and some fine tuning to the machine and of the portfolio approach as you continue?
It's a mix of the two. So the idea is that projects will enter the portfolio and leave the portfolio. So there's going to be ongoing calls to identify innovations against the problem statements. But likewise, those problem statements need to be adapted, and we need to ensure those. So within a 12 to 18 month cycle, we expect to be updating those problem statements and sharing it with the wider community. We're not the only people working in this space, and we want to make sure that others can benefit from what we're doing. So the idea is to broadcast those problem statements just to see who's working in that area. And then we'll have solution sourcing opportunities where we'll look to bring new things into the portfolio. And annually, we're reviewing that portfolio with a group of technical advisors and specialists in the sectors, and looking at whether or not it's adding value and what the vision is for these projects, to know at what point do we hand this over to standard programming and it's no longer sitting within the innovation space. But beyond that, it's also working as a sector. You know, we've just had major events like Stockholm World Water Week, UNC's coming up, and it's the opportunities to work as a team. Like, we can't solve all the problems alone as UNICEF. So who do we bring in, when and how, to improve the opportunities for others to innovate in different areas? You know, it is a group effort, and there's so much work that needs to be done in this sector that there's room for everyone. You know, there are some massive problems to be solved. So it's how we leverage the sector to address those challenges as well.
So thank you again to Esther for joining us today. If you would like to find out more about that portfolio approach to their projects, the UNICEF website has a dedicated page to just that. And if you'd like to be a part of that portfolio approach, UNICEF also has an open call to all startup companies, academia, private sector, and international agencies that meet any of their problem statements or are also working on the same problem statements. You can get in touch with the details shown here. So a final quick reminder that there is an open invitation to sign for the water climate discussion on the 7th of November. We're discussing radical change, and Piers Clark is leading a roundtable on composting toilets. You're going to have to be there to find out more. So, right, I don't know about how you feel, but I've been locked up in this white void for an entire episode. And Piers did promise that if I did this episode as a guest host and I did a good job of it, he'd let me outside for a little bit. So let's go. So, 66 million years ago, a huge asteroid hit the Earth, the dinosaurs died out, and to cut a long story short, the death of the dinosaurs gave us wine. I'm probably going to have to go into a little bit more detail, aren't I? 66 million years ago, a colossal asteroid collided with a part of the Earth in what we now know as Mexico. It wiped out the dinosaurs, and tangent time, technically it wiped out the non-avian dinosaurs, and the avian dinosaurs lived on and evolved into birds. So birds are scientifically speaking classed as dinosaurs, and the dinosaurs didn't actually go extinct because some of them survived and are with us today. Tangent over, isn't science fun? So where does the wine come into the story? Well, when most of the dinosaurs suddenly disappeared, many dinosaur activities suddenly stopped happening. Some academics now think that dinosaurs cleared out a lot of the forest undergrowth and leveled trees within forests. We see the same activity in elephants and other large mammals, after all, with us today. So when the dinosaurs disappeared and the forest undergrowth got a lot thicker, forests grew and forest plants proliferated. And how do scientists think they know that? Grape fossil records. Yes, there are paleobotanists that specialize in grape fossils. The grape fossil record shows that the ancestors of grapevines started out in South America, and they absolutely exploded across the globe when the dinosaurs went extinct. All those forest undergrowths and extra trees not getting uprooted, perfect time to be a grapevine. Within several million years, grapes appeared in the fossil record all over the globe. The grape fossil records also say that the ancestors of the grapevine themselves had many extinction events within several regions, and it's likely by proliferating across the globe that these plants survived and result in the scenery I have with me now. So there you have it. If you are ever at an awkward dinner and you need to break the awkward silence and ask everyone, "Did you know that the death of the dinosaurs gave us wine?" Try it. The awkward silence will be broken. You'll be the life of the party. You can thank me later. With that, we come to the end of this month's broadcast. I was a guest host, Stuart Woolley, and if you want to see more of me, you can hit that replay button. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you for joining us. Our contributors have been wonderful. Thank you again to them. And the sponsors on the screen you see now have also been truly wonderful over the last 69 episodes. Thank you to them too. The next broadcast will be on November the 21st at the usual times. Your clocks may change before then if your region observes daylight savings, so don't let that catch you out. We will be back, well, you and I will be back in the familiar comforting hands of Dr. Piers Clark for that episode 2 days after World Toilet Day, by the way. So until then, keep asking questions, keep sharing, and keep safe.